Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show. On Monday, there will be a final judgment in the High Court regarding the appeal by Australian-born publisher Julian Assange against extradition to the United States. With that in mind, he faces 18 criminal charges, and it's going to be a matter of what the court finally decides. Joining me to discuss this is Chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson, and also Editor-in-Chief of Wikileaks, Kristinn Hrafnsson. Kristinn, thanks for making time for us this evening. What do we predict is going to happen on Monday?
Well, if I were to predict a logical and rational and just outcome, it would be that Julian would be granted leave to appeal. He was granted provisional leave to appeal on one ground. All the other grounds, which were very impressive, were dismissed, and some of those were just dismissed on absolutely incredible twisted logic. We can come into that later. But he was granted this leave to appeal because it seemed that he would not be granted First Amendment protection as a publisher and a journalist in the United States. However, the United States government was asked to clarify that. So they were asked a simple question: will Julian Assange be able to rely on the First Amendment in a U.S. courtroom? The United States government has come back in written form and said he can seek to rely on the First Amendment. Now, that's a no answer in anybody's book. So they haven't fulfilled what the request that the court said. So the logical outcome would be that on Monday, and it shouldn't take long, the judges will say, you haven't met the points that we set, and he will get a leave to appeal. However, we've seen a lot of very strange and spurious things in the courts here. So I have to admit that I take a cynical approach to that.
What is Julian Assange's mood at the moment? I mean, it's almost an impossible question to answer, I know, but after all of this time, year after year after year, where is he now?
Well, he's been in Belmarsh prison now for more than 5 years. Mentally, you can imagine what an effect it has to be an innocent man locked up for more than 5 years in a limbo. Before that, he spent 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy as an asylee. Before that, he was under house arrest for 2 years. So it's 14 years of being deprived of liberty in one form or another. Of course, he's been under an extreme duress, and it's stressful. He has suffered, and I cannot go into personal detail. I visit him regularly, but it's a matter for the court, and the records have been sent to the courts, which say basically that he is in grave danger.
Greg, looking on at this, I can only give my opinion on this. It seems unbelievable to me that a publisher in the 21st century has been treated in this way and continues to be in extremis in the way that Julian Assange is.
Yeah, it's pretty outrageous, and I think I'm one of the converted on this. When it first happened, a decade ago, everybody just kind of jumped to the conclusion, and they threw him in the same basket as Bradley Manning, which I thought, in retrospect, was a mistake. So, Julian was a publisher, or is a publisher, and he published something. That's different than stealing. He didn't steal anything. Bradley Manning stole something. He went to the penitentiary, and for 7 years, as it turns out, because he was found guilty of Espionage Act, amongst many other things. So I think you have to really separate the two. And so, over the years, by paying more attention to the detail, that's one reason I've flipped on this. But the second reason is what's happened in the last 5 or so years in the US and the UK in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. It's outrageous what's happened. And the list of examples, starting with the Hunter Biden laptop and the Russia collusion hoax, and whether it's media companies purposely censoring themselves for the benefit of one view that they have, or the government actually getting involved with the censorship. We saw that here with the 77th Brigade. We saw it constantly with the Biden White House working with Facebook, working with other media companies on the censorship, mostly during the COVID years. That's probably the most obvious. But that's really changed perceptions of, conservatives like myself, who always kind of jump to the first conclusion of, anti-American, let's put him in jail. You know, it's just a natural impulse when you see, you know, American or British soldiers at risk, which you can kind of attach to that. But that's not on Julian. I might not agree with, I would have preferred he didn't publish it, but that doesn't mean he should be in jail for publishing it.
Kristinn, what are the ramifications for the role of publisher, for the role of people who seek to bring truthful, accurate information to the public? What does this fiasco do to the future of publishing in the West?
It is one of the most gravest threats to the future of journalism if this goes ahead. So, and every major human rights and free speech organizations in the world now agree with that, and they are pointing to the very severe implication this could have. The precedent being set, and it could be argued that it had already had a very serious cooling effect on the media, which has hurt the press freedom worldwide. It just goes without saying. I mean, if the American government is allowed to have, you know, universal jurisdiction and as in this case, demand an extradition of an Australian publisher who is publishing in Europe and never comes close to the United States, and hand him over and throw him into jail there. Not a single journalist anywhere is safe in the world.
And to me, the most glaring part of this is that he's hardly alone in having published what he published.
Absolutely. I mean, he was publishing in coordination with one of the biggest powerhouses in the mainstream media environment, with the New York Times, the Spiegel, the Guardian, and actually under Obama, the Justice Department under Eric Holder did look into the matter whether they should open a prosecution against Julian, and they came to the conclusion that would be just too much a danger to the First Amendment principle. They actually called it the New York Times problem, because there was no distinction being made between what Julian did and what the New York Times, our collaborators, our media co-workers in the project were doing.
Greg, surely this is a situation from which the US administration must extract itself.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for the American government, the U.S. government, to be involved in this kind of censorship or the threat to publishers, you know, not just
the threat to a publisher's life.
It's really done great damage. And I think, you know, we've seen, and I agree with you, Kristinn, you know, we've seen the results of this, right? And now I can't pin this particular incident on the lack of interest from the media. Maybe that's just because they become biased or disagree with, you know, with the people and the mainstream. But, you know, this is not a good moment for it, and I'm glad that there's a good chance that he won't be extradited. So.